I trusted him completely. I let my 9-year-old son attend soccer practice every Tuesday and Thursday after school. His coach, Mr. Davidson, seemed like the perfect mentor, attentive, encouraging, and genuinely invested in each kid's development. He had been coaching at our local youth center for 5 years with nothing but glowing reviews. Parents loved him. Kids looked up to him. I felt like my son was in safe hands. That's exactly what made what happened next so terrifying. It started with an innocent email. "Your son has real potential," Mr. Davidson wrote. "I see something special in his game. If he's interested, I could offer him some one-on-one private lessons to really help him shine. Nothing formal, just some extra coaching on his technique and strategy. Let me know if you'd be interested." At first, I was flattered. Of course, my son had potential. Every parent wants to believe their kid is special, and here was a respected coach validating what I already thought. Sarah, my wife, seemed excited too. She mentioned it at dinner, and my son's eyes lit up. He wanted those private lessons. He wanted to be better. As a parent, isn't that what you want? To support your child's dreams? But then something whispered in the back of my mind, a small voice that made me pause. I wasn't sure why I hesitated. Everything about the offer seemed legitimate. But that hesitation, that tiny red flag, made me do something I almost never did. I asked questions. I replied to the email asking for specifics. When would these lessons be? Where exactly? How much would he charge? How long did each session last? I kept my tone casual, like I was just dotting the I's and crossing the T's, but I was already feeling protective in a way I couldn't quite explain. His response came back within hours. "Great question. I usually do these lessons at the community center during open hours, probably Wednesday evenings around 6 or 7 when it's quieter. I charge $40 per session, which is pretty standard for private coaching. Sessions would be about an hour. And honestly, the best results come when it's just me and the player, so it would work better if you dropped him off and picked him up rather than staying to watch. Kids sometimes get self-conscious with their parents around, you know?" There it was. That sentence hit me like a punch in the stomach. It would work better if you dropped him off. The combination of all these small details, the quiet time, the isolated location, the request for privacy, the one-on-one dynamic, suddenly painted a very different picture in my mind, and I realized that my hesitation earlier hadn't been random. My gut had been warning me about something. I didn't panic. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I also didn't dismiss that feeling. I called Sarah immediately and read her the email. She went silent. Then she said the same thing I was thinking. "That doesn't feel right." Sir. We didn't know this man. Not really. We knew what he presented to the world, and we knew the reputation he'd built, but we didn't actually know him. And suddenly, the gap between those two things felt dangerously wide. I got online and started researching. At first, nothing came up. No criminal record, no warnings, no news articles. But then I dug deeper, searching for Coach plus Davidson plus complaint and variations of his name combined with words like investigation and allegation. Still nothing official. But in a parenting Facebook group for our town, I found a single comment from 3 years ago. A mother asking if anyone knew anything about a coach named Davidson at the community center. She'd pulled her son out of lessons because something didn't feel right. That was all she said. But she'd felt it too. That night I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about how vulnerable my son would be in that situation. An adult authority figure, alone, in an empty or nearly empty building, with a child who trusted him and who had been told that the best part of coaching happened when parents weren't watching. The next morning, I called the community center directly. I asked to speak with someone in administration. When I got through, I explained that I was considering private lessons, but wanted to understand their policies regarding one-on-one coaching. Were there requirements? Were sessions supposed to be monitored? Was there any oversight? The director paused when I mentioned Mr. Davidson's name. That pause told me something. She said they had guidelines about private sessions, primarily that they should occur in visible areas of the facility, not in isolated rooms, and that facilities couldn't technically prohibit them, but they preferred a parent or guardian present. She said the center had never received a formal complaint about Mr. Davidson, but added that she appreciated my diligence as a parent. Berkeley appreciated my diligence. Code 4, "You're right to be suspicious. I didn't send my son to those private lessons. I made an excuse to Mr. Davidson. Something about scheduling conflicts and financial constraints. He seemed disappointed but accepted it gracefully. No problem at all," he wrote back. "The offer stands if things change. But things didn't change. Instead, I started paying closer attention, and I noticed things I'd somehow missed before. The way he sometimes put his hand on boys' shoulders and kept it there a beat too long. The way he'd call certain boys over to talk privately, away from the group. The way some of the older kids seemed uncomfortable around him while others seemed to seek his attention constantly. I wasn't a detective. I was just a concerned parent, but I couldn't unsee what I was seeing, and I couldn't stay silent. I reached out to other parents, carefully by asking subtle questions. Did their kids ever mention anything about Mr. Davidson that seemed odd? Had he ever suggested private lessons to them? When I asked these questions, I got two very different types of responses. Some parents looked at me blankly, confused about why I'd even ask, but others, I could see something shift in their faces. A recognition, a shared concern. One mother, whose name was Jennifer, agreed to meet me for coffee. She told me that her 12-year-old son had mentioned that Mr. Davidson had asked him to help clean up after practice in a storage room, something the coach didn't ask other kids to do. When her son came out, he seemed bothered by something but wouldn't explain what happened. She'd asked directly if he was okay, if the coach had done anything inappropriate, and her son had shut down completely. Wouldn't talk about it. The kind of silence that screams something is wrong. She'd reported it to the center, but nothing seemed to come of it. No investigation, no answers. Just her son, frightened and withdrawn. Another father told me his son had received multiple text messages from Mr. Davidson at odd hours, sometimes late at night, with motivational quotes and personal questions about his family life. When the father asked to see the messages, his son got defensive and claimed he'd deleted them, but before they were deleted, the father had seen a few. They seemed innocuous individually, but together they painted a picture of an adult building a private relationship with a child outside of the coaching context. I realized what was happening. Mr. Davidson was using a classic grooming playbook, not all at once, not in an obvious way, but gradually, systematically, he was building trust with kids, isolating them, creating situations where he was an authority figure they couldn't easily resist, and eroding the boundaries between appropriate coach-player relationships and something much darker. The private lessons weren't really about soccer. Armed with this knowledge and these accounts from other parents, I decided we needed to go to the authorities. This wasn't something we could handle ourselves. So I contacted our local police department's community liaison officer and explained what I'd observed and what other parents had told me. I emphasized that we didn't have concrete proof of criminal activity yet, but that the pattern of behavior was concerning and potentially predatory. To my surprise, the officer took me seriously. She said that these kinds of reports were exactly what they needed to hear. She explained that predators often work within institutions that serve children, and they use their authority and reputation as a shield. She said that most people don't report because they're not sure, and because of that uncertainty, perpetrators often go undetected for years. She opened an investigation. What happened next was both vindicating and horrifying. Within a few weeks, as other parents learned that an investigation was underway, more came forward. A boy who had been alone with Mr. Davidson in his car after practice. A girl who said the coach had touched her inappropriately while adjusting her posture during a drill. A teenager who disclosed that Mr. Davidson had asked him to send photos under the guise of checking his form. Another boy who described being manipulated into increasingly inappropriate situations over the course of several months. The authorities didn't immediately arrest him. Investigations take time, especially when they involve children and require careful handling of sensitive information. But they suspended him from his coaching position within days. He wasn't allowed near the facility or any youth activities pending the outcome of the investigation. For the community, it was shocking. Some people defended him, insisting there had to be some misunderstanding. Others felt betrayed and angry that they hadn't seen the signs themselves. But for the kids who had experienced his abuse, there was something else: relief. For the first time, adults were listening. For the first time, they didn't have to carry the weight of their experience alone. The investigation eventually led to charges. Not all of the allegations resulted in criminal counts, but enough did. Mr. Davidson was convicted on 3 counts of child sexual abuse and faces significant prison time. During the trial, the victims had to testify, and their courage in coming forward was the foundation of the case. But here's what haunts me. He was charged for only what he was caught doing. How many kids had he harmed before his exposure? How many more might he have harmed if no parent had listened to their gut? I think about this constantly. I think about how he was 5 years into his position with nothing but glowing reviews. I think about how respected he was. I think about how close I came to sending my son into a situation that could have traumatized him forever. And I think about the fact that the only reason I didn't was a small voice in my head, a whisper that something wasn't right. But here's the thing. That whisper almost wasn't enough. If I had been more trusting, more naive, more convinced that my instincts were being paranoid, my son could have been a victim too. The difference between a child who escapes abuse and one who doesn't is often just a parent paying attention. Since then, I've become an advocate for child safety in youth organizations. I work with other parents and community members to implement better safeguards. We've pushed for policies that require background checks for all coaches and volunteers. We've advocated for mandatory training on recognizing grooming and abuse. We've worked to ensure that whenever a child is with an adult authority figure, there's transparency and oversight. Not because we assume all coaches are predators, the vast majority aren't, but because the minority who are will exploit systems that aren't carefully monitored. They count on the fact that people will be trusting. They count on parents being so busy and overwhelmed that they won't ask hard questions. They count on communities being so eager to find good people to work with kids that they'll overlook warning signs. I want to be clear about something. What happened to my family is one story. But it's not unique. Child sexual abuse is shockingly common. Studies suggest that 1 in 10 children will experience some form of sexual abuse before they turn 18. 1 in 10. That's not a small number. That's a public health crisis. And most of that abuse happens not at the hands of strangers, but at the hands of people known to the child. People in positions of trust. People like coaches, teachers, family friends, and relatives. The thing is, you can't stop predators by assuming you can identify them by looking at them. They don't look like monsters. They look like normal people. They look like Mr. Davidson, who had a winning smile and a way with kids. That's what makes them so dangerous. They blend in, they gain trust, they exploit it. So what can you do? How do you protect your child in a world where the threat can come from the people you're supposed to trust? First, listen to your gut. If something feels off about an adult's behavior toward your child, it probably is. That intuition exists for a reason. Trust it, even if you can't articulate exactly why something bothers you. Second, teach your child about body autonomy and boundaries. Make sure they understand that no adult should touch them in ways that make them uncomfortable. Make sure they know they can tell you if an adult behaves inappropriately, and that they won't get in trouble for telling you. Make it safe for them to report. Third, be present. Know the adults in your child's life. Show up to practices and lessons sometimes. Ask questions about what happens during one-on-one coaching. Don't let your child be alone with adults, especially in isolated settings. I know you're busy. I know it's hard to monitor everything. But the cost of not paying attention is too high. Fourth, create a culture where questions are welcomed and suspicions are taken seriously. If a parent voices concern about an adult's behavior, listen to them. Don't dismiss it. Report it to the authorities if necessary. The worst-case scenario is that you look overly protective. The worst-case scenario if you don't report is that a child gets hurt. Fifth, push for institutional safeguards. If your child is in a school, youth organization, or any institution that works with kids, advocate for background checks, training, and transparency. These things matter. They save lives. The night after Mr. Davidson's conviction, I sat on my son's bed and asked him if he was okay. He said yes. He said he was glad the weird coach was gone. He didn't really understand the gravity of what had happened, and I was grateful for that. His innocence was preserved. But I held that knowledge close. Innocence is fragile, it can be stolen, and the only thing standing between a child's safety and a predator's intentions is the vigilance of the adults around them. I didn't write this story to make you paranoid. I wrote it to make you aware. Awareness is power, and the more parents who are aware, the harder it becomes for predators to operate in the shadows. Trust your gut, ask questions, listen to your child. Show up, pay attention, speak up. These simple actions can mean the difference between a child's safety and a child's trauma. They can mean the difference between a predator getting caught and a predator continuing to harm children for years. My son's coach offered private lessons that weren't about sports, but because I listened to that small voice inside me, those lessons never happened. Other kids weren't as fortunate. Other kids had to live through experiences that no child should ever have to endure. And while I can't undo what happened to them, I can use what I learned to help prevent it from happening to other children. If you see something, say something. If you feel something, act on it. If you suspect abuse, report it. The life you save might belong to someone you love. It might be your own child. And in the end, isn't that worth any amount of awkwardness or social friction? I hope this story reaches someone who needed to hear it. Someone who was feeling that small whisper of doubt and wondering if they should pay attention to it. Someone who was thinking about speaking up but was worried about being wrong. You're not wrong to be cautious. You're not paranoid for protecting your child. You're not overreacting by asking hard questions and demanding transparency. You're a parent, and that's exactly what parents are supposed to do.